John Miller never expected to find himself in a courtroom at 62 years of age. The decorated Marine Corps veteran who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan sat quietly in his wheelchair, waiting for his case to be called. The courtroom was busy that morning. People walked back and forth. Lawyers talked in low voices. The wooden benches were hard and uncomfortable. John fixed his service cap and tried to calm his nerves. He was there for a small traffic ticket. 3 weeks ago, the special controls in his car had failed for a moment at a stop sign. His car rolled forward a few feet. A police officer saw it happen and gave John a ticket. John tried to explain about his car's special controls, but the officer didn't listen. Now John had to come to court to fight the ticket. He lived on a small military pension. Even a small fine would hurt his careful budget. John looked around the courtroom. The walls were wood panels that looked old but clean. American flags stood, tall at both sides of the judge's desk. Pictures of past judges hung on the walls. Their stern faces seemed to watch everyone below. "Case number 47293, John Miller," called the court clerk, a woman with gray hair and glasses that hung from a chain around her neck. John took a deep breath and wheeled himself forward. His chair made a soft squeaking sound on the polished floor. People watched him move to the front of the room. Some looked with pity, others with respect when they noticed his military cap and the medals on his jacket. Judge Samuel Grayson sat high on his bench. He was a tall man with silver hair and deep lines on his face. He had been a judge for over 20 years. Everyone in town knew him as strict and serious. He looked down at John with a stern face that showed no emotion. "Mr. Miller, please rise for the court," Judge Grayson said in a loud, clear voice. A wave of whispers moved through the room. People shifted in their seats. They looked at John in his wheelchair, then at the judge. The court-appointed lawyer next to John, a young man named Peter Walsh, leaned down to whisper something. But before Peter could speak, Judge Grayson spoke again. His voice was harder this time. "Defendant will please rise for the court." The room went completely quiet. It was so silent that John could hear the old clock on the wall ticking. Tick, tick, tick. Each second felt very long. John's hands gripped the wheels of his chair. His face turned red. He felt hot under his collar. Everyone was watching him. He had faced gunfire and bombs in war, but this moment made him feel small. "Your Honor," Peter began, "my client is a disabled—" John raised his hand to stop his lawyer. "It's all right," he said in a quiet voice. Officer Frank Murphy stood at the side of the room. He was the one who had given John the ticket. Frank was a young officer, maybe 30 years old. He had short brown hair and stood very straight in his clean, pressed uniform. When he saw what was happening, he took a step forward as if to help. But something in John's face made him stop. John had a look that Frank recognized. It was pride. It was dignity. It was the face of a man who had faced worse things than this moment. With great effort, John placed his hands on the armrests of his wheelchair. The bones in his hands showed through his skin. Years in the military and then years using a wheelchair had made his arms strong, but age had started to take that strength away. His arms shook as he started to push himself up. The metals on his jacket made soft clinking sounds against each other. They told a story of bravery that no one in the room knew yet. The pain showed on John's face. His teeth clenched. Sweat appeared on his forehead. Each inch he raised himself cost him great effort. Everyone could see he was pushing against not just his body's limits, but against the weight of years of injury and pain. Susan Davis, the court clerk who had called his name, watched with her hand over her mouth. She had worked in this courtroom for 15 years. She had seen people cry, scream, even faint, but she had never seen anything like this quiet battle. "I've never heard the courtroom so quiet," she would tell her husband that night. It was like everyone was holding their breath at the same time. John's wheelchair was locked in place, but it still moved a little as he pushed. The rubber wheels squeaked against the floor. John's breathing grew heavier. He made no sound of complaint, but his face showed everything. This was a man who had faced pain before and knew how to bear it with dignity. The judge watched from his high bench. At first, his face stayed stern and unmoved, but as John continued to struggle, something changed in Judge Grayson's eyes. A small line appeared between his eyebrows. He leaned forward slightly. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Outside, normal life went on. Cars passed by. People walked dogs. Mail carriers delivered letters. But inside this courtroom, time seemed to stand still as everyone watched John Miller try to stand. Peter Walsh stood next to John, unsure what to do. He was a new lawyer, just 3 years out of law school. In all his training, nothing had prepared him for this moment. He wanted to help John, but he also saw the determination in the old veteran's face. Officer Murphy's hand moved to his belt, then away again. Later, he would tell his wife that he had never felt so useless in his uniform. "I wanted to help him," he would say, "but it would have been wrong. Some battles a man needs to fight himself." As John continued his struggle, Judge Grayson's expression softened further. He looked more carefully at the medals on John's jacket. His eyes widened slightly as he recognized some of them: the Purple Heart, the Bronze Star. These weren't given out for small acts of courage. The judge removed his glasses. He set them down on the bench in front of him. For the first time, he really looked at the man before him, not as a defendant, not as a case number, but as a human being. "Mr. Miller," the judge finally said, his voice noticeably softer, "may I ask where you served?" John was still trying to stand. His arms shook badly now. Sweat ran down his face. But when the judge spoke to him, he raised his eyes. "Soldier to soldier." Man to man, between deep breaths, John managed to answer. "3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, Afghanistan, sir." The words came out with difficulty but with pride. Each word carried the weight of years of service, of friends lost, of pain endured. Judge Grayson's face changed completely. The stern mask fell away. What replaced it was a look of recognition, of respect, of regret. And in that moment, everyone in the courtroom knew they were witnessing something important. Something that went beyond traffic tickets and court procedures. Something about human dignity and sacrifice that would stay with them long after they left this room. The bailiff, a woman named Carol Richards, stood at her post by the judge's bench. She had been a bailiff for 12 years. She had seen this judge sentence people to years in prison without showing any emotion. But now, she saw something she had never seen before. She saw Judge Samuel Grayson's eyes fill with tears. Judge Grayson looked at John with new eyes. The courtroom remained silent. The clock on the wall kept ticking, but it seemed like time had stopped for everyone else. "At ease, Marine," the judge said in a soft voice. "Please, be seated." John's arms were shaking badly now. Sweat covered his face. Slowly, carefully, he lowered himself back into his wheelchair. His face showed the pain it caused him, but also relief. He took several deep breaths. His chest rose and fell under his jacket with the medals. Then Judge Grayson did something that shocked everyone in the courtroom. He stood up from his high bench. In his 20 years as a judge, he had never left his seat during a case. But now he stepped down and walked toward John. Carol Richards, the bailiff, looked surprised. Her hand moved to her gun out of habit, then away again. This was not normal, but it was not a threat either. She stayed at her post and watched carefully. Alan Brooks, the prosecutor, stood up from his table. He was a thin man with a neat beard. He had worked for the county for 12 years. He had never seen anything like this before. "Your Honor?" Alan asked. His voice showed his confusion. Judges did not leave the bench. That was not how things worked. Judge Grayson ignored him. He walked with steady steps across the courtroom floor. His black robe moved slightly as he walked. Everyone watched him. No one spoke. The judge stopped in front of John. For a moment, he just looked at the older man in the wheelchair. Then he did something even more surprising. He extended his hand to John. "Staff Sergeant Richard Grayson, 1st Marines, Vietnam," he said. "I apologize for not recognizing a fellow Marine." A small sound of surprise moved through the courtroom. No one had known the judge was a Marine. He had never talked about it. John looked up in surprise. His eyes were wide. Slowly, he reached out and shook the judge's hand. His grip was firm despite his tired arms. Judge Grayson turned to face the people in the courtroom. His face was different now. The stern mask was gone. The people who came to this court every day had never seen him look like this. I was 23 when I lost my best friend in the jungle outside Da Nang, Judge Grayson said. His voice was clear and strong, but there was emotion in it now. He threw himself on a grenade to save our unit. The courtroom was completely silent. Even the usual sounds of papers rustling and people shifting in their seats had stopped. Everyone was listening. Judge Grayson turned back to John. May I ask how you were injured, Marine? John sat up straighter in his wheelchair. When he spoke, his voice was calm and matter-of-fact. IED outside Kandahar 2010. Saved 3 of my men but lost both legs below the knee. Officer Murphy had been standing quietly at the side of the room. Now he stepped forward. He looked different, too. When he had entered the courtroom, he had been confident, even a little proud. Now he looked humble. Your Honor, if I may, Officer Murphy began. Judge Grayson nodded for him to continue. Officer Murphy turned to John. Sir, had I known about your vehicle's adaptive controls, I should have listened more carefully when you tried to explain. I'd like to withdraw the citation. John looked at the young officer. He saw something in the man's face that he recognized. Respect, not pity. John nodded his thanks. Judge Grayson looked at Officer Murphy with approval. Then he walked back to his bench. But he did not sit down. He remained standing, tall and straight. This case is dismissed, he announced. His voice was firm but gentle. And this court extends its gratitude to Mr. Miller for his extraordinary service and sacrifice. In the back of the courtroom, a door opened. A woman walked in. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a notebook. Her name was Linda Peterson. She was a court reporter who was late for work. She stopped when she saw everyone looking at the front of the room. Linda saw Judge Grayson standing instead of sitting. She saw John in his wheelchair. She did not know what had happened, but she could feel that something important was taking place. Then Judge Grayson spoke again. I would like to ask everyone in this courtroom to stand in honor of Mr. Miller's service to our country. One by one, people stood up. First, it was Peter Walsh, John's lawyer, then Alan Brooks, the prosecutor, then Officer Murphy, then Susan Davis, the court clerk, then Carol Richards, the bailiff. Soon, everyone in the courtroom was standing. Some were veterans themselves. Others had family members who had served. Some had no connection to the military at all. But they all stood together. Linda Peterson was the first to notice the tears on Judge Grayson's face. They ran down his cheeks, but he did not wipe them away. He stood tall and let them fall. Soon others in the courtroom were crying too. An older man in the back row. A young woman near the door. Officer Murphy's eyes were wet. John sat in his wheelchair, looking around at all the people standing for him. His face showed many emotions at once. Pride, sadness, gratitude, remembrance. After a moment of silence, Judge Grayson spoke again. This court will take a 15-minute recess. His voice was thick with emotion. He put his glasses back on as if trying to hide behind them. As people began to move around again, several approached John. The first was an older man named George Williams. He walked with a slight limp. Sergeant First Class Williams, Iraq, 2003, he said as he shook John's hand. Thank you for your service, Marine. A middle-aged woman named Donna Martinez came next. My son is in the Marines now, she told John. Seeing you today, it helps me understand what he's part of. Officer Murphy waited until others had spoken, to John. Then he approached again. He seemed nervous now, not like a police officer, but like a young man with something important to say. Sir, Officer Murphy began, my brother served in Afghanistan too. He came back different. He doesn't talk about it. but seeing you today, it helps me understand him better." John looked at the young officer. "It's not an easy thing to understand. If you haven't been there," he said. "But the trying matters." Judge Grayson watched from his bench. He had taken his seat again, but his usual stern expression had not returned. He looked thoughtful now, reflective. The court clerk approached. The judge. "Your Honor, do you want to continue with the docket?" Judge Grayson nodded slowly. "Yes, Susan. But first, I'd like to speak with Mr. Miller privately in my chambers." Susan looked surprised but nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." She walked over to John, who was still talking with Officer Murphy. "Mr. Miller, the judge would like to speak with you in his chambers, if that's all right." John looked up at her, then over at the judge. He nodded. Of course. Judge Grayson's chambers were behind the courtroom. There was a ramp installed years ago for accessibility. John wheeled himself up it easily. The judge walked beside him, not ahead or behind. The judge's chambers were simple but elegant. Bookshelves lined with law books, a large wooden desk, pictures, in frames, a window that looked out at the town square. Judge Grayson closed the door. He took off his black robe and hung it on a hook. Underneath, he wore a simple white shirt and black pants. Without the robe, he looked like any other man in his 60s. "Please make yourself comfortable," he said to John. John positioned his wheelchair near a chair where a visitor would normally sit. He looked around the room with interest. His eyes stopped on a photo on the desk. It showed a much younger Judge Grayson in a Marine uniform, standing with other young men in the same uniform. "Da Nang, 1972, Judge Grayson said, noticing where John was looking. "2 weeks before we lost Bobby." He pointed to one of the smiling young men in the photo. John nodded. He understood without needing more words. He had his own memories like this. His own lost friends. Judge Grayson sat down in his chair. For a moment, neither man spoke. They sat in a silence that was not uncomfortable. It was a silence of shared understanding. Judge Grayson opened the bottom drawer of his desk. He took out a small wooden box. It was old and worn at the edges. He placed it carefully on the desk between them. "I don't show this to many people," he said. His voice was quiet now, not like the loud, firm voice he used in the courtroom. He opened the box. Inside was a Purple Heart medal, just like one of the medals on John's jacket. Next to it was a folded American flag in a triangle shape, the kind given at military funerals. "Bobby's mother gave me these after the funeral," Judge Grayson said. "She said he would have wanted me to have them." John nodded. He understood the weight of such a gift. "I almost didn't come home myself," Judge Grayson continued. He rolled up his left sleeve. There was a long scar that ran from his wrist almost to his elbow. "Shrapnel from the same grenade. I was in the hospital for 3 months." John looked at the scar. Then he looked back at Judge Grayson's face. "The ones who don't come back, they stay with you." "Every day," Judge Grayson agreed. "For 53 years now." The judge closed the wooden box and put it back in his drawer. Then he looked directly at John. "I've been on the bench for 20 years, he said. "I've seen thousands of people come through my courtroom, but I've never felt as ashamed as I did today when I realized what I had asked you to do." John shook his head. "You were following procedure, I understand that." "Procedures can be changed," Judge Grayson said firmly. "They should be changed. No veteran should ever feel uncomfortable in my courtroom." Outside the chambers, they could hear the sounds of the courthouse. Phones ringing, people talking. The normal business of the day continuing. But in this room, something important was happening between these two men. "May I ask you something, Mr. Miller?" Judge Grayson said. "John, please," John said. "And yes, you can ask me anything." "How do you do it? How do you keep going?" The judge's question was simple but deep. "After everything you've been through?" John thought for a moment before answering. He looked down at his wheelchair, then back up at the judge. "One day at a time," he said. "Some days are harder than others. On the bad days, I remember the men who didn't come home. I live for them too." Judge Grayson nodded slowly. Bobby used to say he wanted to be a lawyer. That's why I went to law school after I came home. I thought I was honoring him. But somewhere along the way, I think I forgot the real reason I was doing it. It's easy to forget, John said. The world moves on. People who weren't there don't understand. So we try. To fit in, we try to be normal. But we're not normal, are we? Judge Grayson said. It wasn't really a question. No, John agreed. We're not. But that's not always a bad thing. A knock came at the door. It was Susan, the court clerk. Your Honor, the courtroom is ready whenever you are, she said. Judge Grayson looked at his watch. Thank you, Susan. We'll be right out. After Susan left, the judge stood up. He walked to the coat rack and took his black robe. He put it on slowly like a man putting on armor. John, I'd like to ask you something, he said. Would you be willing to help me start a veterans court program in this county? John looked surprised. A veterans court? Yes. A special court for veterans who get in trouble with the law. Instead of just punishing them, we would help them get the services they need. Mental health care, addiction treatment, housing, whatever they need to get back on their feet. John thought about this. You think the county would support that? Judge Grayson smiled slightly. After what happened in that courtroom today, I think a lot of people would support it, and I have some influence around here. John smiled too. I would be honored to help. The two men left the chambers together. The judge did not walk ahead. He walked beside John as they returned to the courtroom. The courtroom was full again. People stood when the judge entered. Judge Grayson took his place on the bench. John wheeled himself to the back of the room. He planned to stay and watch the rest of the day's cases. Before we continue with today's docket, Judge Grayson announced, I want to say something. The room went quiet. Today I was reminded of something important. Justice is not just about following rules. It's about seeing the person in front of you. Really seeing them. Their struggles, their strength, their humanity. People looked at each other, surprised by this speech. No one had ever heard Judge Grayson talk this way. Starting today, things will be different in this courtroom. We will follow the law, but we will also follow our hearts. We will remember that every person who comes before this court deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. In the back of the room, John listened. He felt something he had not felt in a long time. Hope. After court ended for the day, many people came up to John. Some were veterans. Some were family members of veterans. Some were just regular people who had been moved by what they saw. An older woman named Betty Howard approached John as he was about to leave. She had white hair and walked with a cane. She had been sitting in the courtroom all day. My husband never made it back from Vietnam, she told John. Her voice was soft but clear. He was reported missing in action in 1970. They never found him. John didn't know what to say. There were no words for such a loss. So he just reached out and took her hand. Watching you today, Betty continued, the way you carried yourself, it helped me remember him. Not the missing part, the living part. Thank you for that. As John wheeled himself out of the courthouse, he saw Officer Murphy waiting by the door. Sir, Officer Murphy said, I wanted to apologize again about the ticket. And I was wondering, my brother, the one who served in Afghanistan, he doesn't talk to anyone about what happened over there. But maybe he would talk to you? John looked at the young officer. He saw the worry in his eyes, the love for his brother, the helplessness of not knowing how to help. Give me his number, John said. I'll call him. Officer Murphy's face showed relief. He took out his phone and they exchanged numbers. Thank you, sir. This means a lot. Outside, the afternoon sun was warm. The town square in front of the courthouse was filled with people going about their day. They walked past John without knowing what had happened inside the courthouse, without knowing how lives had been changed. John sat in his wheelchair, feeling the sun on his face. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he had a purpose, again, not just surviving day to day, but actually making a difference. His phone rang. It was Judge Grayson. John, I've already spoken with the county commissioner. He's interested in the Veterans Court idea. Can you meet tomorrow to discuss it further? Yes, John said. I'll be there. As he wheeled himself toward the parking lot where his adapted van was waiting, John thought about all that had happened because of one moment in court. One moment when a judge ordered a disabled veteran to stand. Sometimes life changes in big ways. Wars, injuries, deaths. But sometimes it changes in small moments too. A look of recognition, a hand extended in friendship, a question asked with real interest. John Miller had come to court expecting justice. Instead, he had found something he wasn't even looking for. Connection, purpose, a way to help other veterans like himself. As he reached his van, he looked back at the courthouse. Through a window, he could see Judge Grayson still at his bench, working on papers. John thought about the young Marine in the photograph, the one who had died in Vietnam. Bobby. We'll make you proud, Bobby, John whispered. We'll make all of them proud. The next morning, John woke up early. The sun was just coming up. Light came through his window and made patterns on the floor. He had not slept well. His mind kept going back to everything that happened in the courtroom. John lived alone in a small house that had been made special for his wheelchair. The doorways were wide, the counters were low. The bathroom had bars to help him move around. It was not fancy, but it was his home. He made coffee and looked at his phone. There was a text from Judge Grayson. Meeting at 10 a.m. with County Commissioner. Bill Hayes, Courthouse, Room 204. John got ready carefully. He put on a clean button-up shirt and his best pants. He made sure his medals were straight on his jacket. Today was important. When he arrived at the courthouse, it felt different than yesterday. Yesterday, he had come with worry in his stomach. Today, he came with hope. Room 204 was on the second floor. There was an elevator, but it was old and small. John had to fold his wheelchair a certain way to make it fit. A young woman helped him. Her name tag said Mary Jones, court assistant. You're John Miller, aren't you? Mary asked as they rode up. Everyone is talking about what happened in Judge Grayson's courtroom yesterday. John was surprised. Everyone? Mary nodded. I've worked here 3 years and I've never seen Judge Grayson smile. But this morning he was different. He even said good morning to the janitor. The elevator doors opened. Mary pointed down the hall. Room 204 is that way. Good luck, Mr. Miller. John wheeled himself down the hall. The floor was smooth and made it easy for his wheels to roll. When he reached room 204, the door was open. Inside, Judge Grayson was talking with a large man in an expensive suit. This must be Commissioner Hayes. Ah, here he is, Judge Grayson said when he saw John. Bill, this is John Miller, the man I was telling you about. Commissioner Hayes turned. He had a round face and gray hair. His handshake was firm. Mr. Miller, it's an honor, he said. My father was in Vietnam. Army. He passed away last year. I'm sorry for your loss, John said. They all sat down at a large table. There were papers spread out on it, maps and charts and reports. I've been looking at other counties that have veterans' courts, Judge Grayson said. There are over 400 in the country now. They've had good results. Fewer veterans going back to jail. More getting the help they need. Commissioner Hayes nodded. The numbers look good, but starting a new court program costs money. Money we don't have in the budget right now. John listened as they talked about money and budgets and politics. It was complicated. He was just a regular veteran, not someone who knew about these things. But he knew about veterans and their needs. May I say something? John asked during a pause in their conversation. Both men looked at him. Of course, Judge Grayson said. John took a deep breath. I'm not a political man. I don't know about budgets. But I know veterans. I know what it's like to come home and feel lost, to feel like no one understands, to feel like you don't fit anywhere. Commissioner Hayes was listening closely now. Many veterans get in trouble because they're hurting. John continued. They're trying to make the pain go away. Alcohol, drugs, fighting. These are just ways to feel something other than the pain. John looked down at his hands, then back up at the two men. What if we could reach them before they get in real trouble? What if we could show them there's another way? The room was quiet for a moment. Then Commissioner Hayes spoke. My father never talked about Vietnam, not once in all the years I knew him. But after he died, I found a box in his closet. It had letters in it. Letters he wrote but never sent. In those letters, he talked about the things he saw, the things he did, the guilt he felt. Commissioner Hayes's voice became thick with emotion. If there had been something like this veteran's court when he came home, maybe he wouldn't have drunk himself to sleep every night. Maybe he would have talked to someone instead of keeping it all inside. He looked at Judge Grayson. How much money do you need to start? Judge Grayson looked surprised at this sudden change. Well, for a pilot program, I think we could start with about $50,000. That would cover a part-time coordinator and some basic services. Commissioner Hayes nodded. I can find that money. We have a contingency fund for special projects. I think this qualifies. John could hardly believe what he was hearing. Things like this didn't usually happen so fast. But sometimes, when the right people come together at the right time, big things can happen. There's one more thing, Judge Grayson said. He looked at John. We need someone to be our Veterans Outreach Coordinator. Someone the veterans will trust. Someone who understands what they're going through. John realized they were both looking at him now. Me? But I don't have any training for something like that. You have something better than training, Judge Grayson said. You have experience, you have respect from other veterans, and most importantly, you care. John thought about it. The idea scared him a little. He had been living a quiet life since he came home from Afghanistan, keeping to himself, not getting involved. But maybe it was time for that to change. I would need help, he said finally. I don't know all the rules and procedures. We'll get you all the help you need, Commissioner, Hayes promised. Training, support staff, whatever you need to make this work. After the meeting, John went to the cafeteria in the courthouse basement. He needed time to think about everything that had happened. The cafeteria was almost empty. Just a few people, eating late lunches. John got a cup of coffee and found a table in the corner. As he sat there, he noticed a young man watching him from across the room. The young man looked familiar, but John couldn't place him. Finally, the young man got up and walked over to John's table. He was tall and thin. He had the look that John recognized in many young veterans. A certain hardness in the eyes. A way of standing that was always ready for trouble. Mr. Miller? The young man said. I'm Kevin Murphy, Frank Murphy's brother. He told me I might find you here. John remembered now. This was the brother of the police officer from yesterday. The one who had served in Afghanistan. Please sit down, John said. Kevin sat down across from him. His hands were not still. They kept moving, tapping on the table, adjusting his watch, picking up a napkin and putting it down again. Frank said you were a Marine. Afghanistan, Kevin said. His voice was flat, like he was trying hard to keep emotion out of it. Yes. 3 tours. You? Army. 2 tours. Kandahar and Helmand Province. John nodded. He waited. He knew Kevin needed to talk, but he had to find his own way to the words. I don't sleep much, Kevin finally said. When I do, I have dreams. Bad ones. I wake up and I don't know where I am. Sometimes I think I'm still there. I know, John said quietly. I have those dreams too. Kevin looked up, surprised. You do? Even after all this time? They get less frequent, but they don't go away completely. At least they haven't for me. Kevin looked down at his hands. They were still now. I haven't told anyone about the dreams. Not even Frank. Especially not my parents. They wouldn't understand. No, John agreed. They wouldn't. Not really. But that doesn't mean you have to carry it alone. Kevin was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, does it ever get better? It was a simple question, But it was also the most important question, the question every veteran had to face. John thought carefully before answering. He would not lie to this young man. He deserved the truth. Yes and no, he said finally. The pain doesn't go away, but you get stronger. You learn to carry it better, and on good days you can put it down for a while. Not forever, but for a while. Kevin nodded slowly. He seemed to be really hearing John's words. Frank said you're starting some kind of program for veterans? Yes, John said. A veterans court. And some other support services too. For the first time, Kevin smiled slightly. Maybe I could help. I'm not doing much else these days. John saw something in Kevin's eyes. A small spark. The same spark John had felt yesterday in the courtroom. Hope. We could use all the help we can get, John said. Why don't you come to our first planning meeting next week? 6 months passed. The leaves changed colors and fell from the trees. Snow came and then melted away. Spring brought new flowers and longer days. And in that time, the Veterans Court went from an idea to a reality. The first official day of Veterans Court was a sunny Tuesday in May. John arrived at the courthouse early. He wore his Marine dress uniform. It still fit well, though he had needed help from a tailor to adjust it for sitting in his wheelchair. Room 103 had been changed for the Veterans Court. It was smaller than the main courtroom. The chairs were arranged in a circle instead of rows. There was no high bench for the judge. Instead, there was a regular table where Judge Grayson would sit level with everyone else. Kevin Murphy was already there when John arrived. Kevin looked different now than he had that day in the cafeteria. His hair was neatly cut. His clothes were clean and pressed. The restless movement of his hands had calmed. He was setting out folders on the chairs. Morning, John, Kevin said with a smile. Big day. Yes, it is, John agreed. He looked around the room. Everything looks good? In the past 6 months, Kevin had become an important part of the Veterans Court team. He had gone back to school to study social work. He worked part-time as John's assistant in the Veterans Outreach Office. The work seemed to help him as much as he helped others. Officer Frank Murphy came in next. He was not in his police uniform today. He wore regular clothes and came as Kevin's brother, not as a police officer. Kevin told me I should come see this, Frank said as he shook John's hand. I'm proud of what you've all built here. More people arrived. Betty Howard, the woman whose husband never returned from Vietnam. She had become a volunteer with the program, making phone calls and sending letters to veterans who might need help. Commissioner Hayes came with his assistant. He had been true to his word about the funding. In fact, he had found more money than he first promised. Enough to make the Veterans Court a permanent program, not just a trial. And then there were the veterans themselves. 5 men and 1 woman who would be the first cases in the new court. They sat nervously in their chairs, not sure what to expect. They had all been arrested for minor crimes, disturbing the peace, drunk driving, shoplifting, small things that could lead to bigger trouble if no one helped them. Judge Grayson was the last to arrive. He did not wear his black robe today. He wore a regular suit, but pinned to his jacket was something new, a small Marine Corps pin, the same kind John wore on his uniform. Good morning, everyone, Judge Grayson said as he took his seat at the table. Thank you all for being here for this historic day. The first session of our county's Veterans Court is now in session. He looked around the circle at the nervous faces of the veterans. But before we begin the official business, I want to tell you why we're here, why this court is different from any other court you've been in. Judge Grayson's voice was gentle but clear. We're not here to punish you. We're here to help you. We understand that sometimes the hardest battle is the one that comes after you. Leave the service. The battle to find your place, to feel at home again, to live with the memories of what you've seen and done. John watched the faces of the veterans as Judge Grayson spoke. He saw recognition in their eyes. They were hearing something they had never heard in a courtroom before. Understanding. Each of you will be assigned a mentor. Judge Grayson continued. Someone who has been where you are. Someone who can help you navigate the path ahead. You'll also have access to services, mental health care, housing assistance, job training, whatever you need to get back on your feet. A young woman raised her hand. She had short brown hair and a scar on her cheek. Her name was Lisa Carter, Army, 2 tours in Iraq. What's the catch? She asked, her voice suspicious. Nobody gives something for nothing. Judge Grayson nodded. It was a fair question. The catch is that you have to do the work. You have to show up for your appointments. You have to stay clean and sober. You have to be honest with your mentor and with this court. It won't be easy. But I believe each of you can do it. Lisa didn't look convinced, but she didn't argue. John wheeled himself to the center of the circle. I'm John Miller. I'll be working with each of you as the Veterans Outreach Coordinator. I lost my legs in Afghanistan in 2010. When I came home, I was angry. I was in pain. I felt like no one understood. I pushed people away. He looked around, at each face. I'm not going to lie to you, the path ahead is hard, but you don't have to walk it alone, not anymore. The first session of Veterans Court lasted 2 hours. Each veteran told their story. Each one received a plan tailored to their needs. There were tears. There was laughter. There was, most importantly, hope. As the veterans filed out, each one stopped to shake John's hand. Lisa, the suspicious young woman, was the last to leave. Do you really think this will help? She asked John. It already has, John said. You're here, aren't you? That's the first step. After everyone else had left, John, Judge Grayson, Kevin, and Commissioner Hayes stayed behind to talk about how the first session had gone. I think it went well, Judge Grayson said, but this is just the beginning. The real work starts now. Kevin nodded. Lisa's going to be a tough case. She doesn't trust easily. None of them do, John said. But trust is earned, not given. We'll earn it. Commissioner Hayes looked at his watch. I hate to break this up, but we have that interview with the newspaper in 20 minutes. They want to do a story about the Veterans Court. John had forgotten about the interview. He wasn't comfortable being in the spotlight. But Judge Grayson had convinced him it was important to spread the word about the program so other veterans would know about it. The interview took place in Judge Grayson's chambers. The reporter was a young woman named Andrea Lee. She had a notebook and a recorder. I want to understand how this all started, Andrea said after they had all introduced themselves. What was the spark that led to the creation of the Veterans Court? Judge Grayson and John looked at each other. They hadn't told many people the full story of what happened that day in court. It started with a mistake, Judge Grayson said finally. A mistake I made. He told Andrea the story, how he had ordered John to stand in court, how John had tried to obey despite his disability, how that moment had changed everything. As Judge Grayson told the story, John watched Andrea's face. She was young, probably just out of college. She had likely never known anyone who served in the military. But he could see that the story was touching her. When Judge Grayson finished, Andrea was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, Mr. Miller, how do you feel about that day now? Are you angry about what happened? John shook his head. No, not at all. That moment changed my life. It gave me purpose again. It helped me see that my experience, even the painful parts, could be useful, could help others. Andrea wrote something in her notebook. And what would you say to other veterans who might be struggling right now? John thought carefully before answering. I would say, you're not alone. What you're feeling, others have felt too. There are people who understand, people who want to help. All you have to do is let them. After the interview, John wheeled himself outside. The spring air was warm and fresh. In the town square across from the courthouse, people were enjoying the nice day. Children played. Couples walked hand in hand. An older man fed pigeons from a bench. John watched it all. This was why he had served, why all of them had served. So people could have days like this, peaceful days, normal days. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Lisa Carter, the suspicious young woman from Veterans Court. When can we meet? I'm ready to talk. John smiled as he typed his reply. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., my office. I'll be there. Judge Grayson came outside and saw John sitting there. He walked over and stood beside the wheelchair. What are you thinking about? The judge asked. John looked up at his friend. I'm thinking about how one moment can change everything. One order to stand. Judge Grayson nodded. One moment of seeing someone clearly, really seeing them. Together they looked out at the town square, at the world they had helped protect, at the future they were still helping to build.